right, good afternoon. Place that right there. I was asked to speak about, I'm a stage wanderer, so be aware of that. Risk-based approach, which is something I do speak about a lot, but risk-based approach in practice means something a little different. How the things that we come up with as we're in the food safety world, which is highly complex and technical, translate into what happens on the factory floor, or what happens in practice cross-functionally across the business. So I'll find this. There we go. Here we go. So it's especially pertinent with us in a very complex organization. This is what we have in the United States with Nestlé. Nestlé US is the largest market that Nestlé has in the world. We represent in North America about 30% of the global sales for Nestlé. And with that then is quite a big diversity of products. Products that people are trusting are meeting their needs: quality, taste, experience, food safety. I say that last because it's not something, as we all know, that consumers think about, right? They are thinking about, when they purchase something, the experience and the taste and the things that come with it, and food safety has to come along with there. And when you look at that portfolio, what's important about it is that we have products that follow people and their animals through the entire life. Nutritional items for newborns, folks for nutritional supplements or nutritional elements for folks in their later years or with special needs, and everything in between. And that is important because that element of consumer trust in the products is woven through their entirety of their life and with their family and with their friends. So risk-based thinking then becomes really integral to maintaining that consumer trust. And risk-based thinking in this context is a little bit of how are we weaving ourselves through the many complexities that come along with the changing world. So what you see up here then on the right side is our global quality policy. It's a graphic, and food safety is one component, but what you see core in the middle, and I'm going to read it, is enhancing quality of life and contributing to a healthy future through those four components. Preference and consistency is important. We're looking for repeat experiences. Zero defects and no waste, which is kind of a business element that comes into it, but certainly consumer confidence and stability of processes and consistency play into that. Everybody's commitment. There's a lot of talk all the time about culture and food safety culture, and everybody's commitment to producing the right product in the right way with the right intentions. And then finally, this safety and compliance on the left. And this is defined by what you see on the left side, which is the graphic that represents the Nestlé Food Safety Management System. Nothing secret there. You're not seeing anything you don't know. And when I talk to my peers across other companies, we're not inventing new things, right? You've got HACCP. Everybody understands what HACCP is. That's our risk assessment protocol and procedures, the kind of mental gymnastics that we go through to determine, in simple terms, and those that work with me, I speak in very simple terms. We live in a complex world, but what is HACCP? HACCP is, what do I care about? How much do I care about it? And what am I doing about it? And that's what's happening in that right side. And the intersection between HACCP and prerequisite programs is conditions management. That's all it really is. Prerequisite programs are intended to manage the conditions that we manufacture. And that is risk-based every day. We don't look for everything all the time with all the people. It's very pragmatic in terms of what are the influences, what are the pressures. Right? If anybody's involved with pest control, we talk a lot about pressures. But you can talk about the same thing with pressures of foreign body, pressures of microbiology, pressures of chemical contaminants, and where and how are you managing those and mitigating those to reduce the influence of them on whatever the finished product is or the consumer experience. The bottom part, of course, very important, competency and capability, and that's where that culture intersection comes. And in the Venn diagram that I've got there, prerequisite programs and capability is all about behaviors. Most simply, keeping doors closed, right? If I've got bugs in my house, I probably got a window open. I got to go find my teenager, figure out what's going on. It's all about behaviors, and then control measure management, obviously that kind of boils down in HACCP, but that is what food safety looks like in a risk-based, pragmatic program, how it develops and how it manifests itself on the factory floor. These intersections become very important, the behaviors of the people, and do they understand what and why they're doing things, why it's important. We have everybody wash their hands when they come in the factory. We give them structure around what we want them to do. Wash with the water, use the detergent, do it for 20 seconds, these kind of things. What happens when there's only a half dozen sinks and there's 50 people coming through at a shift change? And they've got to get to a place or they're going to get in trouble. Are they making the right choice? Are they making the right choice? And are they making the choice because they know the importance of going across that threshold and washing their hands? So the vigilance that we have within the company then from an end-to-end management of food safety systems kind of divides the world into three sections. The Nestlé world is what do we have and what's important from a design standpoint. If I don't have the right design of processes, design of recipes, if I don't have the right design, then the rest of it doesn't really work out. Food safety and quality as delivered, that's the conversion process in the factory, and there's separate considerations that take place there, but are certainly leveraging what comes out of the design element of thinking about things. And then food safety and quality as experienced. That's an important, we all play a role in what happens when the product leaves our control and goes into the consumer's hands. From simply, are they choosing it on the store shelf? Does it open properly? When they cook it, do they get the experience that they think they're going to get? Are those instructions clear? The nutritional balance of elements, all those kind of things. So all that world kind of breaks down into when we're designing and looking at how we're influencing the end-to-end conversion of materials and ideas into the product as food safety and quality by design, as delivered, and as experienced. This becomes very difficult and challenging in a world. I've had this slide now for about 4 or 5 years in my portfolio, and it used to be I have a slide about the external influences on us, and it would change pretty regularly, and this has remained for the last several years. Like consumers continuing to understand the first bullet point, misuse opportunities, product use changes with the consumer and the things they're doing. And we're responsible. We as producers are responsible for what happens with that product in the consumer's hands. It's very rare where something is determined to be gross consumer misuse. And we get complaints for the product didn't perform this way or that way. Smokers are a big thing, right? The Traegers and all these kind of things. And we have people that want to cook a pizza, frozen pizza, on a smoker. And then they wonder why it doesn't come out nice. Well, when you cook something frozen at 200, 220 degree Fahrenheit for 3 hours, okay, anyway. This first bullet point in regulators, the shift back and forth, and we kind of shifted again, and we're sticking here from a risk-based approach or kind of thought process to a hazard-based approach. And a lot of that's driven by chemical contaminants. And that's a real challenging space for all of us to operate within. What's happening in supply, frequent changes of suppliers, which was a lot driven by just simply cost and changes in optimization and uses, but now has a high degree of of political influence on that as well, with tariffs and things of that nature. And then finally, the labor force. So these four things continue to be challenges for us. And when you're working in an environment to produce an outcome, a safe product, or hit your quality standards, then the influence of these things becomes very important. And how do you create a dynamic risk-based environment with all these moving parts? That is tough. Again, I'm a simple person, so the continuous improvement cycle is something I talk about internally quite a bit. Plan, do, check, act, right? And it's based upon a lot of what are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to get to? What is the gap between where we are versus where we're going? And it provides us the means to be agile in this changing, uncertain world. Now, I got down here simplicity not without its challenges. Maybe within your organizations you experience the same thing. I'll bring out the build. Is there's a fatigue that comes in with simply following this process, plan, do, check, act. And in an internal conversation around prevention from removing the weaknesses that we have in our system, it's easy to get into this routine where you're doing the first bit, plan and then do, and not doing the rest. Why is this important in a risk-based operation? Well, we're realizing all the time the weaknesses that we have through internal audit, through external entities, through consumer interactions, and the repeats and trying to eliminate those are what's important. So Plan, Do, Check, Act is a very simple tool. I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. It's what ISO 22000 is really structured around, but the pitfall there is really kind of getting caught on the right side of this and not leveraging the left side, and that's where it becomes very important. If we're feeding that cycle with simply the failures, then we're not really doing our job. That internal understanding and how do we leverage a risk thought any better than using the folks that we have internal in our factories that are the experts on the processes. So a strong verification program certainly drives a culture of improvement. And I have this chart up here which looks like it has a lot of words, but it's really very simple. When we think about verification, we talk about our design of verification systems in the factory in this way. And you have two elements that we're an ISO organization, so I borrow from a lot of the ISO standards that talks about efficiency and effectiveness, two different elements. And those are important because you can be misled by your own information and your own data and what risks you have within your operation if you're relying on the output alone without knowing if you followed the plan. That may be a little bit confusing. Environmental monitoring, pretty simple program. We all do this. What does the data tell me? What does all negatives tell me? Is that a good data point? What if I didn't do everything I was supposed to do? Pretty simple. Was the task performed as designed? That's an element of verification that needs to be incorporated into your programs, along with what was my outcome. But beyond just, did I do the task right, there's also a system side to anything we're doing. Environmental monitoring, microbiology testing, all intended to protect the process. This information also feeds into risk and risk-based. How am I looking at my system every day and understanding what is it telling me so that I can rebuild those systems in a dynamic way? The difficulty that we have with this is it's all run by people and it's all looked at by people. We're hearing a lot about digital. That's where I'm kind of going to go next. But when we look at how does this feed into all this verification is that bottom part of the plan, do, check, act cycle is the check. And this is critical to continuing to mature your programs and build them to eliminate the risks that you see. The solutions to how we improve our systems are more founded in people than anything else, but they're balanced by process and technology. So within Nestlé, we're always looking at these bubbles of people, process, and technology. And how do I balance these? And the people one tends to grow because it's easy to throw individuals at things, but it really is about the culture. And do we have the culture of curiosity and understanding how the job each and every individual is doing is contributing to the end point or the finished product end point of food safety. So all this kind of go into the culture. Education of folks, communication internally, clear, transparent communication, goals, expectations, reinforcement, accountability. All those are very, very important elements to the culture maturity that all of us are working on and within Nestlé is working on. I want to turn attention a bit to the digital world and how this all comes together. So I've kind of given some very basic stuff up to this point. We all know prerequisite programs. We know how HACCP works. We know how food safety systems work. But there's an opportunity now, we're all embarking upon the journey of a digital transformation. And if you're like us, you've done this in a bit pockets of places where it seems to work pretty well. Traceability of materials, pretty ripe for digital interface, scanning things in, scanning things out. People management, labor management, all those kind of things, all pretty easy. But when we look at the whole value chain and trying to pull this all together into a digital space, it becomes pretty daunting. And there's a lot of, within Nestlé, a lot of elements and attributes that have to connect together and have to talk to each other. Now, for food safety, we all know HACCP is the core of what we're doing. That's the machinery. That's the motor of this. And HACCP is the next logical place, the big ripe area that we have within Nestlé for digitalizing. Now, this is what this looks like within HACCP, and we've got all these inputs, and within our organization, there are tens of thousands of data points that are generated every day. What do we do with those to understand how risk is moving and how risk is modulating? That's a challenge. That's a big challenge. Up until recently, I'd say within the last decade or so, all that was looked at by people. And when we look at our whole organization within Nestlé, kind of this is what the classic HACCP process looks like. Conversion and digitalization of this world is a pretty daunting task. When we looked at internally at ourselves, we have about 100 unique unit process steps. We have 350 factories worldwide, okay? And 100 unique process steps. Sauce making, cartoning, pasteurizing. Those, it doesn't seem like a lot, 100, and all those are put together in different forms and different foundations to come with about 500 different unique line setups for our whole portfolio. So this becomes very complex from a HACCP standpoint, and the material portfolio that sits way down here is even more complex. Now, from a HACCP from a digitalization standpoint, standardization is what we're after. And we also know that we have about 30 control measures across the whole organization. Some are used all over the place, metal detector, X-ray. Some are used in very specialized areas. Some may be regulatory driven. But when you look at the world of 350 factories, all these different products, the digitalization of this becomes very complex. The important here is, and what we set out to talk about here today was a risk-based pragmatic approach. So if I just have a HACCP document now that is in a digital format, it doesn't do me a lot of good. It's just another format. I'm going to come back to that point. But what we have from the digitalization and getting to why this is so important for us to dynamically manage risk is, how are you all doing HACCP? Or how have you done HACCP for the last 20 years? Paper, right? Excel sheets, a lot of manual administrative elements, trying to pull together what materials you have, which may be coming from a digital system. But for the most part, it's very paper-driven exercise, and that's how it's been since HACCP came around 70 years ago. So turning to how we look at this, and we kind of think about that complexity that I shared with you for a moment, is we start to talk about HACCP in a modular way, then I can start to standardize the risk approach, and we can start to standardize the management approach to those risks. And I can start to get more dynamic in what I'm doing. So what we would have the factories do and how this ends up coming about is there's models that are modular. So you have a model for pasteurizing, or a model for sauce making or something like that. And the factories will ultimately put together the pieces parts in the system, and we're working with an organization. I think they're here. Our partner in this is Viva. I don't want to go without mentioning them. But you have models. Model pulls into a factory plan, which is then localized a bit for what the operation is, and it goes through some comparisons and optimization for whatever the factory specific needs might be, which might relate to process order, might relate to the regulatory environment, something like that. Now, the nice part about this is, instead of everybody building their own individual HACCP and then cascading through, is we can start to, if we've got a new product that I might be building in a factory or a line, we start to pull from, maybe I've got a cereal and grain operation. I'm going to pull that from a pet care model. And maybe there's a pasteurization step, and I'm going to pull that from a dairy model. And maybe this is a glass jar hot fill operation. I'm going to pull that from a nutrition model to construct simplicity and standardization within how we're managing food safety. And along with those comes, what are my hazards? What are my risks? What do I care about? How am I going to control them? There is a localization that occurs. What is the vision here? How do we wrap this all up? The ultimate place is, imagine a future where your HACCP system sits and it's digitalized. And on the floor, folks know this is the task they're supposed to do, this is the task they're supposed to do, because system's telling them. What if there's a change? How does that flow through your food safety program now? If you've got a change in a pressure from a material, that review takes place in a room somewhere. How can that review now take place live, dynamically, digitally? Now, this is where the operations folks get a little crazy. Okay? Do your maintenance people know that your food safety people are talking about them all the time in HACCP? All right, how many unit processes say preventive maintenance is an important prerequisite program? All over the place. But is that connected in your systems in a dynamic way? How can I be pragmatic in my factory with knowing what task needs to be done and why it's important to food safety control? In a digital world, my HACCP system will push that into the maintenance routines. In a digital system, the maintenance system that's capturing this that knows whether a task was done or not done will push it back into HACCP to say my risk has changed because something hasn't happened that's supposed to happen. I mentioned operations folks getting nervous. Can you imagine coming in on a Monday morning and now you have a new control measure in your factory because the work orders didn't get done over the weekend? Okay, that can be a little bit disruptive, but you understand the connections that I'm talking about here, and some of those things are important and some of those things are not so important. The answer to it is in HACCP, but do we have the right connectivity? I saw there was Trace Gaines did a presentation this morning talking about materials and COAs and that information that is being fed in. Where's that going? I can pull that in a future space directly into here, influencing my hazards library, influencing early warning, influencing HACCP, making dynamic adjustments in what I need to look at, when I need to look at it, how often I need to look at it. Now, you might have come in here expecting me to tell you today, what can I do better to have real-time, pragmatic, risk-based food safety controls? And I'm telling you that's very difficult. We're all doing that. Of course we're doing that. But we do it with periodic frequency. All the stuff we're going to talk about, we heard this morning and from other folks, and all the meetings you go to for the next several years are going to talk about the digital transformation and the assistance of artificial intelligence. And that's what this is about. That's what we're trying to do here. This is, I'm told, the largest undertaking. We have 350 factories that are going live with the digital HACCP process now, this month. And the connectivity will come, but I was talking with another group. Think about a time when HACCP is receiving information from your metal detectors and x-rays. And it's adjusting enterprise resource planning. And it's adjusting material risk or process risk. And it's adjusting what you need to do on the factory floor. This requires a culture that is agile and is educated and understands. So all these things are coming together at one time for what I think is a really, really exciting time period for us. It was interesting going back to the Trace Gaines presentation this morning where you said 80+% of the companies recognize the importance of having a digital strategy. 6% maybe think they actually have one. I wonder if that number is even a bit high, because there's a difference between thinking you have one and actually having one that you can action on, right? Yeah, so the question that we started with a little bit and that I wrestled with was, and I didn't want this to be a technical presentation, is how are we really being educated on the factory floor with our people for pragmatic, risk-based tasks and decisions to drive food safety, reduce public health problems. That's tough if we're just using paper and people. I'm not sure that we got much more to go to mature there, right? Because we're all being pressured with the amount of people we have. I could flood the floor with 75 different, quality control auditors to work on these things. But I think, what you're seeing is a transition into how do we take all this information we have, make sense of it, and then come out of it with minor adjustments that are tweaking and managing our processes. So, thank you very much for the time today. It's an exciting time for us, and looking at, all this is dependent upon the blocking and tackling that we do every day. But as I said, there are hundreds of, tens of thousands of data points that are coming out of there every day that tell us whether we're being successful or whether we're not being successful. I see excitement in overlaying many of these things and seeing where the nuanced relationships are, and that's where, you know, that last slide, the feed into our food safety system, and then the extraction into what's the world, the future world look like on a day-to-day basis of how we're adjusting to make sure we're protecting consumers. So with that, my name's David Clifford. I'm with Nestlé. Thank you for the time this afternoon. Looks like there's 3.5 minutes left.
Yeah, we have a few minutes for a question or two with David, if anyone has one.
I gotta get the bottle of water.
Any questions for David? We have one here.
With the digitalization across the different plants and the different processes, how are you implementing like the verification that one process on that new product, how you pulled from the different sectors, are compliant with the different, I guess, product designs in that scenario?
So the models are created by the models come out of our R&D sector, right? They are the experts on the process. They are the experts on the product. They're the experts on what the needs of that are. So I work in an operational space. Okay, I can challenge them, but really it's about, my group is about implementation of what the center of intelligence for us is saying, this is the right way to assure and establish quality and safety of the product. So, and we have a fixed number of those sites. So, you know, we have within Nestlé, we have an R&D that's focused on confections, et cetera, et cetera. So those are coming from a central brain by category, so to speak.
Okay. Additional questions?
You talked about like the HACCP plan changing maybe day by day according to what happens, right? How would you make sure that the teams at those facilities knew what to do, or would it be pulling from a bank of critical control points that they were already trained on those protocols?
That's a bit of a provocative position that I'm saying is obviously it would be very disruptive if the food safety control measures of the factory change day by day. If they change day by day, then we have something upstream that is too variable, right? And if they change day by day, then we're in trouble today because we don't know that's happening. So I think what the real message there is that there's a lot of data inputs that are difficult for us to see with clarity what the real risk is. And sometimes those do change dramatically. And sometimes we learn after the fact that change has taken place and that we could have or should have done something different. So I say it the way I say it to try to get attention, especially internally from my operations and engineering colleagues, so they understand that this is a train coming down the track and we got to jump on. But I don't see that. Now, perhaps what I do see changing dramatically is maybe the material profile of what we're testing and what we're checking as incoming based on product testing, maybe foreign body detection, those kind of things. And all those things are guided by right now a digital screen that operators within the factories in real time, the connected worker has on what they have to do. So something coming in the door, they're going to scan on this material from this vendor. This is what the qualification scheme is. I have a COA. Does that match what the qualification scheme is? Is there something missing? I have to do something else, that type of thing. In real time, that is adjustable without too much disruption.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.